I would argue that product market fit has never been enough, right? Even in different conditions and even historically. Sometimes, right, we have been riding on such a high, hype tide that we didn't realize that that was the case, right? But that's always been the case. And actually, as a matter of fact, something that I actually teach at, Foster School of Business, School of Product Management, is this idea that an MVP is not just a viable product. It's not just what you can throw out of the door in a certain amount of time. But that V stands also for valuable and validating.
Welcome to What If with Leslie Grandy. We are entering an era where the ability to build has been radically democratized. With AI, open platforms, and conversational coding tools, the technical barrier that once separated idea people from builders is collapsing. More people can turn a concept into a working prototype than at any point in history. That sounds like an innovation boom, and in many ways it is, but it also changes the rules of what makes something successful. For years, we treated product market fit as the most important goal. If you built something people wanted, growth would follow. That assumption starts to break down when thousands of people can build versions of the same idea quickly and cheaply. In that environment, the differentiator is not simply whether a product works, it's whether anyone trusts it, adopts it, and sticks with it. Distribution, credibility, and emotional connection begin to matter as much as functionality. The question shifts from can you build it to why will anyone choose yours? We are also seeing innovation accelerate in ways that can be misleading. Prototypes appear faster, ideas multiply, but the distance between a promising concept and a product that works at scale has not disappeared. If anything, that gap becomes more important to understand. The ability to generate ideas and even working demos can create the illusion of progress. Turning those early signals into something durable still requires judgment, discipline, and a deep understanding of the people you are building for. Innovation is not just the spark of creation, it's the long, often unglamorous work of refinement, validation, and delivery. This moment raises a broader question about how organizations and individuals think about building. When tools make it easier to create, it becomes tempting to assume that more output equals more innovation. But abundance can create noise. The real advantage may come from knowing which ideas deserve to be pursued, which ones need more time, and which ones should be left behind. The fundamentals of product thinking, including understanding value, experience, and context, do not go away. In fact, they become more critical. This is the backdrop for this conversation with Marcello Majonchi, Chief Product Officer at Arduino. We explore what happens when anyone can be a developer, when the cost of experimentation drops, and when innovation is no longer constrained by access to technology. What does product market fit mean in that world? How do ideas move from imagination to something that people actually use and care about? And what becomes the true source of advantage when building is easy, but earning trust and delivering value is still hard? Marcello also explains why he believes physical books still hold a valuable place in this increasingly digital world. I hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome to What If with Leslie Grandy. My guest today is Marcello Majonchi, the Chief Product Officer at Arduino, which was recently acquired by Qualcomm. He's accumulated a wealth of experience in various technology companies and academic institutions. Marcello has served in leadership roles at Solaire, Microsoft, Facebook, Amazon Web Services, and DocuSign. And he's also an advisor to a variety of startups. Marcello and I got to know each other as executives in residence at the Product Management Leadership Accelerator, an executive education program at the University of Washington's Foster School of Business. Welcome to the podcast, Marcello.
Thank you for having me, Leslie.
Right. And thank you for all of your contributions to the Product Management Leadership Accelerator. We really appreciate having you on the team.
It's a great pleasure to be back.
Yeah, terrific. I want to start by asking you about this quote I heard. I heard you describe your job as helping turn napkin sketch ideas into products that actually work at scale, from embedded hardware to AI in the cloud. So what's the hardest part of making that leap from imagination to something that customers love?
I would say that traditionally, access to technology has been the biggest barrier to turn ideas into something that is tangible, right? That delivers impact. And as a matter of fact, the very existence of Arduino is to try and solve this problem or help solve this problem. And I think that many of the technologies that today we put under the umbrella of generative AI are actually going in that direction, which is bringing down the barrier of access so that anybody, not just someone with a major in computer science or data science, can take advantage of it. And when Arduino was started, it actually was started in an academic institution where interaction design was taught to non-technical people, and the very platform was invented to solve a very kind of tangible problem of having to over and over teach the basics of electronics and coding to people that just wanted to be creative with that.
So that's really fascinating. I want to get back to that in a second, but as you've built teams from one person to hundreds, what is the sign that you see that a team is feels safe to take that bold leap to try something new and imaginative?
Well, I think that feeling safe and taking a bold leap, I don't think there are two things that can really coexist. I think that it's not that you have to feel safe to take a bold leap. You need to be comfortable with the fact that you can fail because you're doing something that has done before. And I think that as a leader, as an organization, is you make people feel safe by simply account for failure in what you do, and just knowing that if you want to innovate, it might go wrong. It's part of the game, and it's absolutely fine. Of course, as long as there are two important caveats to this, right? First, you left no stones unturned. Second, you don't fail twice because of the same reason. So you learn from your failure. Once you do those two things, I think that failure is just part of the game. It's accepted. And actually, as a matter of fact, I like to say that I am what I am mostly because of the failures that I had. Because I learned way more from that and from those than from the successes that I had.
That's terrific. Can you share a moment where failure changed how you lead or how you help your team take those risks?
Well, in a way, I think that for example, I had this kind of very odd, opportunity in my career, which is the fact that for three different instances in three different companies, I got to run the same type of product, right? It was in a startup, Solaire, at Microsoft, and at Arduino. Three different companies at three different stages, right? Early stage startup, a big, hyperscaler of the cloud, and mid-size scale up, so to speak. And what I learned there through failure is that if you're building the same product for the same market, depending on the company you are in and the type of goals that you are setting for the type of company that you are, the type of product that you build is different. And as a result, you always need to take in account all the different conditions that are kind of building up your, I would say, ecosystem of conditions that are part of your setup environment for where to build.
When you think about what the failure looked like that taught you that, is it that you were more driven towards a final outcome as opposed to sort of turning over all the stones and getting all of the opinions, or is there something around that particular failure that you're thinking about that really helped you sort of solidify your leadership style?
I would say that in a nutshell, failure as a product builder, right, is usually lack of product market fit. This, I would say, that accounts for 90% of my kind of job related failures, right? As I guess the vast majority of failures of product managers out there. The realization was that becoming aware that the lack of product market fit was not necessarily caused by either the market or the product, but the market, the product, and the stage of the company and the state of the market, right? But the stage of the company is an active player into building your product market fit. I will give you a very simple example, right? Let's say that you are a startup and you are building a SaaS product and you're bringing it to the market, whatever that SaaS product is. The willingness to adopt that product from a customer is different, whether you're an early stage startup, a scale up, or an hyperscaler. Same product, same value proposition, same ROI. As a customer, you're more willing to take a bet on a more credible or more a company with a legacy, with a brand, with a with a history of success. Taking a leap on a startup means that you have to have a much higher gain for you to be willing to take that gamble. And so the same product with the same type of ROI might land in a wildly different way if you are proposing that product as a startup or a different type of company.
Yeah, so this is a topic I'm really fascinated by, because I believe in a world where it's possible for people to build products easily, have the tools, and put them out there. That product market fit won't be enough anymore, because having the audience and the customer trust first is going to make a difference in a world that's fractured and fragmented by people putting products out there in the domain area, but not necessarily, as you say, having the trust of customers. So is it fair to assume that you believe as well that product market fit isn't enough anymore, and that customer trust and that customer relationship and that access to that audience is really as important as product market fit?
I would argue that product market fit has never been enough, right? Even in different conditions and even historically. Sometimes, right, we have been riding on such a high, hype tide that we didn't realize that that was the case, right? But that's always been the case. And actually, as a matter of fact, something that I actually teach at, Foster School of Business, School of Product Management, is this idea that an MVP is not just a viable product. It's not just what you can throw out of the door in a certain amount of time. But that V stands also for valuable and validating, which means that valuable, you need to deliver value right from the get-go, right? And that value needs to be enough for someone to take a gamble. Second is validating. It means that your MVP is going to be limited, but you need to find a way within the product to convey the idea of where you are going to go with the product, your strategy, your roadmap, so that people will buy in not just the product and MVP that you have today, but the future updates and upgrades that you will bring over time to that product. So I have this concept of MVP cubed, right, on the V.
No, I love that. It does make me wonder too, as we look at the future where problem solving goes, because of all of these open platforms and these conversational tools for generating code. Is it less about whether or not there's a big audience for it and more about the personal and local solution that someone's able to build? It's cheap, it's fast, and I can test it quickly, but maybe now there's more smaller niche communities because the cost to build has gone down so low that are an adequate audience for that kind of product. And so now maybe what you see is a proliferation of small audiences with specific product market fit and unique problems that are being solved by someone in that community.
This is a very fascinating question, right? And I think that my answer is definitely affected by the fact that this isn't my first rodeo, right? I've been in the business for long enough to kind of, really, I can't help but thinking that this is ultimately just yet another abstraction. Of course, it's a type of abstraction that we have never seen, before, but nevertheless, is an abstraction. It's similar to many other abstractions that were introduced in the software development space over the years. And I can help but remembering that every single time one of these new abstractions was brought on the market, there was the same kind of discussion, right? It isn't now too easy for people to just build applications. Will be just under a deluge of application and won't be able to know where the value is. The truth is, albeit is super easy, probably as easy as it has ever been to build applications. Those applications will stick and scale only if they deliver meaningful business value. And so I'm not really worried about vibe coded apps to kind of take over. Yeah, maybe they're gonna it's gonna be harder to find your app in the App Store on iOS, but from a business perspective, only the ones that will deliver unprecedented value or value way above average will be the one that will actually be wildly successful, as it has always been.
Well, that's interesting though, because it looks like in that world, competitors could be anybody, right? It isn't necessarily the enterprises you thought were your, competitors. And so what do you see companies needing to do in order to protect around that kind of unexpected disruption that can come from just the capacity to build something that solves a problem without all the resources of a large enterprise needed to do it.
Again, right, history is kind of repeated itself, right? Back in the early 2000s, it appeared impossible that a startup could deliver an enterprise software that would scale. And yet Salesforce, right, was a startup and basically took over that space, the space for CRM. And so I think that ultimately is all about the return on the investment that the adoption of your product can guarantee to your customer. That is the ultimate decision maker, right? And your ability to tell that story and to spread that story is basically your conduit, your gateway drug to be able to for that value to actually get expressed. So it's a combination of these two things. And again, it's gonna be a phenomenon that will at some point settle. Right, the hype will kind of fade into the plateau of productivity, as Gartner says, and at that point, the only thing will remain is going to be the value. Because at the end of the day, who cares if my app was vibe coded, as long as it has some key characteristics, right? It delivers the value, it's maintainable, gets updated, it's convenient. I have an ROI. I don't care if it was vibe coded or kind of coded by hand by people in Italy or in the US or in any other country.
When I think about though that accessibility, I also think about, does it have an impact internally in an organization about who they empower to innovate and how they think about innovation organizationally? Because now it used to be that there was only people who could invest a certain amount in emerging technologies, go deep with them before they became solid and proven. Now it feels like anyone, right, can solve a problem with AI, with coding tools, with open platforms like Arduino and Raspberry Pi. Should an organization internally think about innovation differently now as a result?
Again, in a way, it's something that has already been seen, right? But in another way, I think that there is an opportunity that organization can take, which is being able to embrace a faster development cycle, where you can iterate, way faster, because you can basically test out and prove your, hunches and your hypothesis with real data, not just with proxies, much faster. And so it's more about putting yourself in the mindset that you can try more things, and there's going to be some sort of a natural selection for the things that will stick and will deliver value, rather than spend months, if not years, just planning with the illusion that you have only one shot at execute. You can execute iteratively and still be successful.
As a leader, though, you probably have people now generating ideas and showing prototypes at an amazing rate compared to what it was in 2013. And you're seeing your team all feel empowered, perhaps, by these technologies. How do you as a leader communicate the difference between an idea that needs more time and know why that idea needs more time and exploration versus one that's really not worth exploring? And how does the team see that as a optimism around the ideas that they can do, rather than a fear of putting forth an idea that might not be worth exploring? What do you do to set the stage for that conversation?
Well, as a matter of fact, Leslie, I don't think, at least my observation and my personal experience, right? I don't think that is the proliferation of ideas that don't deserve to be executed the problem. I think that the problem is that those ideas that gets prototyped, too often they are brought to scale without realizing that there is a difference between testing out and validating something in a contained, confined environment and scale it out to a completely different scale. Right? I think that is the leap, that is the step where I've seen leaders make the most mistakes, either by discarding the complexity of scaling, multiple order of magnitudes in terms of adoption, in terms of complexity, or not taking into account the cost and the time that is needed to bring something from a very good prototype or proof of value to an actual production ready solution that delivers value in production at scale for the long run.
It sounds from your answer and the way that you've kind of been consistent in this point, it feels like these new technologies haven't changed how you think about delivering great products that customers love. that the rules of the road for doing that are no longer irrelevant. They're even more relevant because of the plethora and ubiquity, right, of ideas and tools. And so whatever discipline you had before, either as a company or as an entrepreneur, is even more important now in order to make sure that you actually cut through the noise.
Yeah, absolutely. In a way, right? You should think that it changes the journey. It doesn't change the destination, right? The fact that you strap yourself, on a rocket, to go from A to B doesn't change the fact that you are still going to B, right? And in what matters, right, from a customer perspective, is the value that they will get by adopting your product. And again, they can benefit from the fact that that product can be, evolved, quicker than in the past. But if it doesn't deliver that key business value that is in the promise of the product, it doesn't matter, how it was, how it was built or how fast it was built.
And as AI kind of gets into this mix in terms of requiring more judgment around ideas that may be generated or validating output, what do you think really defines an AI native team that's using AI as part of the accelerant to innovation?
Well, if I think about the risks, right, of using AI, I think that there is one that is the one that scares me, right, as a product leader, but also as a technologist the most, which is, in a way, right, we are cutting corners by kind of, deferring a good part of, the architecture, the implementation to AI. We don't know really what is the debt that we are injecting into the overall infrastructure, right? And not knowing that is what scares me the most. And so when you think about a team that delivers at a faster rate, at a faster pace with AI, the challenge is to keep your data and your technical vulnerabilities, I should say, in control over kind of the long run. I think that this is the real risk that I'm also seeing arising in early adopters or bigger adopters of this type of technology.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of What If with Leslie Grandy. If you'd like to learn more about how we can work together to expand your organization's capacity to innovate, to leverage AI as a strategic thought partner, and to inspire your teams to think bigger and take intelligent risks, visit lesliegrandy.com today. As I think about the innovation process within your team and the culture of teams over the last 10 years, what part of the culture are you seeing adjust to this influx of capabilities that can accelerate and amplify the output? Are you seeing it create additional pressures or different kinds of behaviors that you now have to manage as a leader?
Well, for sure there is this tendency because you can, on paper, right, you can deliver faster. There is an expectation that results will come faster. But sometimes, if you are kind of, just seeding a new market, it doesn't change if you're doing with vibe coded, products. It's going to take the same amount of time for that market to mature and being able to appreciate the value that you are delivering. The other, challenge that I'm seeing, or the other risk that I'm seeing, is that, from a product management perspective, actually more than a risk, I think that is just a change in the way that the profession of product management is now perceived because of AI and because of this ability to, quickly iterate and create application. And that the function of product management is much closer to business than has ever been, because you have the opportunity to be more tightly connected with the business results of the product that you're managing. So this is the change in culture where you're actually seeing product management teams that are much more savvy in the business aspects rather than in the technology aspect, also because of this abstraction that is taking everybody a little bit more apart from the underlying plumbing of the.
It's interesting because I've actually heard from some people that product management diminishes its importance because there's so much information available to every role, and that the decision-making structure around product management doesn't require that single expert anymore that really sees that 360-degree view because all information is available and accessible to everyone. I don't agree with that, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are about this idea that all these tools make people developers, well, all these tools also make people maybe think they can be better product owners, product managers, product builders.
You see, on one side, as a matter of fact, this is turning everybody into a product manager because, in a way, right, the way that you interact with, with ChatGPT, with Claude, with Copilot, or whatever, you effectively give requirements to this, to this prompt. Your prompts are requirements. So effectively, anybody that is doing vibe coding is doing product manager job.
Right.
So this is one side, right? On the other side, I think that we are always discarding or not taking enough in account all the other skills and set of expertise that the product manager needs to pour into what they do. Is not just about building the right thing, right? It's about building it right that makes a difference, right? And because again you've been part of the my program at Foster's product management school. There is Alberto Savoia that has written this amazing book that is called The Right It that is precedes AI, but it's all about this, right? How do you make sure that you're not just building something that works, but you're building the right thing to solve that problem in a way that differentiates you and brings value to the customer. At the end of the day, this is what a product manager does, and this is not something that is taken away in any way by AI.
I think to an earlier point you made, I would also add that I think the emotional connection to the product, the way that it makes someone feel when they use it, the experience of using that product and having the result of using that product, those things are difficult to discern in the mechanics of vibe coding or AI driven idea generation, right? I think the discernment of what's valuable is one thing, but it's also that intangible sense of how do I feel when I use an Apple product versus a Microsoft product? How do I feel, right, when I use a Google product versus an Apple product? Like there's different ways an Android phone probably makes someone feel than an iOS phone makes someone feel. And those are really hard for the machine to report on and to guide.
Absolutely. I could not agree more with that. And as a matter of fact, this is something that for us at Arduino, it's something that we feel every day, right? Because at the end of the day, what we do is electronic boards, right? And on paper, right, an electronic board, whether it is from Arduino or from any other vendor, it's still just a PCB with some chips on it, right? What differentiates, I believe, right, an Arduino product versus everything else is that we don't just think about putting what chips we will be putting on a board and the functionalities that they have, but what is going to be the experience of using these products to create something, right? I have interaction designers in my team, right? We have designers that are thinking about the design of the PCB, which is not just functional, right? But it's something that has a meaning that needs to be conveyed without reading manuals. Some say that the biggest innovation that Arduino brought into the industry is actually this thing here, which is writing, in the connectors what they do, right? It seems very basic, but before Arduino, nobody was doing that.
And that changes the overall way a consumer experiences that product. And from a emotional and mental perspective, it makes adoption easier. I'm assuming that's the real driver of it.
Absolutely. That's the reason why, there are cartoons that have the shape of an Arduino board, but there are no cartoons with the shape of any other board. It humanizes it, right? Anthropomorphizes it in a way.
And that's a really good point too. I think we get a little bit distracted by the humanized responses we get from AI when we think that we've landed on an idea. It reinforces it by saying that's a sharp perspective or that's a great observation. And so we kind of run with an idea that may be half baked because we have this sort of human interaction that validates us. What do you see right now in what people are using AI for in order to drive their own work forward versus really and amplify their own ideas? Are you seeing your team really take an idea and explore it with AI and go through that process of imagining the idea and the story that that product would tell? Or are you seeing most of them really looking for a PRD or a document that they can run with that basically organizes their thinking? Like, is it a thought partner or is it a productivity tool within your product team?
So the truth is that I'm seeing it used, in all the ways possible. The difference is that, when I'm seeing that it's successful, it's actually when it's used in very specific ways. It's either when, you hand over to AI kind of, those mundane tasks, like, here the unstructured documentation, make me a data sheet, or when you use it to kind of, iterate on something, right? In the sense that I give you some conditions, right? Help me, break it down, help me elaborate, help me kind of, gain, references. I think that this, if you harness the capabilities of AI, this is where you're really augmenting it, right? It's not about, being replaced by it, but actually allow it and use it in a way so that you are augmented by it. Right. And, as a joke, when I'm asked what I don't like about generative intelligence or generative AI, instead, what I say is that I love it. The only two things that I don't like about it, one is the fact that it's called generative, and the other one is the fact that it's called intelligence. Right? Because if you call it, derivative inference, I would be super happy with it because it would be the best factual description of what that technology does. Calling it artificial intelligence or generative intelligence is just misleading because it's technically not appropriate, and it's also an incentive to give this anthropomorphic meaning to something that doesn't think in the way that we think something thinks.
And I think the other part of it, of this anthropomorphized partnership, is again this idea that there's actually judgment that needs to be overlaid to it, right? That you get something back, but that you have to challenge or question its authority, right, to solve the problem the way it comes off. It seems so authoritative. I'm curious, as you're seeing sort of this next generation of junior product managers come in, where all these tools are available to them on the landscape, are their critical thinking skills getting worse? Or are they getting better? Are these helping people be more capable of really peeling back the onion and seeing if there's a there? Or is it really something that makes them lazier thinkers?
I don't, if anything, I've seen senior leaders getting lazier thinkers because of AI, not younger kind of, generations, right? In a way, to be honest, my observation about, younger generation hasn't changed in the last 20 years since when I was part of that generation, which is the distinction is not the tooling that they use, but the passion and the dedication that they put into whatever they do, whatever tools they're actually employing. And that curiosity that is the result of passion and dedication and determines how much they are driven and how fast and big of a result they're actually getting out of whatever they're doing.
I think that's true. I think the laziness label is probably going to people with more of a bent towards productivity and saying, well, if you can move me forward faster, then I'll lean into that, versus maybe a healthy skepticism in a younger generation around what technology can do for them and what role they still need to play in it. I think that's what I'm hearing you say, and I agree. I see that this is like a boon for older people who hated doing all those mundane tasks. And so they just start outsourcing everything and then maybe eventually outsource their thinking.
Yeah, and let's not forget that the AI tools that we have available tends to tell you that you are right all the time, which is something that is quite appealing, right, to a certain demographic that we identify as senior leaders.
When I hear you speak, you feel like you're just innately a builder and a maker, and that this is what really defines who you are. But what if you couldn't do this? What if you couldn't be a product leader? What if you couldn't invent and imagine products that really change people's lives? What would you do with your life? What would be your passion to pursue?
Well, as a matter of fact, my biggest passion outside of my job is something that has nothing to do with technology, which is actually making books, which is not I don't mean writing books, but literally kind of book binding right together pieces of paper. So I will still be a maker, right? Just not right a creative maker with technology, but just more tradesman of paper. That's my nature.
That's so fascinating. And how come books? Why books? Where did you kind of get into that lane?
Growing up, I kind of, started to fall in love with the object of what a book is and what it represents. the fact that is, literally, an hallucination in a box. And I kind of, started to, particularly like, the physical aspect of it, right? The size, the materials. I'm a very tactile type of person. So the different type of paper, the different type of, either leather or kind of, paper or other type of material that are used for the covers. Always loved it. And I picked up that as a, as a hobby. And, I have my own bookbinding lab, and I, really proud of it.
That's so fascinating. First of all, I'm not a Kindle reader unless I have to be because I absolutely need that physical experience. The page turning, the smell of a new book, the way you open the binding when you finally get to the middle of it and you really need to open it wide. All of that experience, to our earlier point, it gives me a feeling that I don't get when I read the Kindle. The Kindle sort of reduces it to words and the story, but not an experience in my mind that you're describing, right? That tactile feeling, that smell, that sense of commitment to the physical goods. I look at your bookcase behind you, I'm assuming because of all of that, you don't move a lot, because the one problem I've had when I've moved is boxes and boxes of books and how much they weigh and how much it costs to relocate them and replace them in some new environment.
You would think so, but as a matter of fact, I actually move quite a lot, and I also spend a lot of time, right, putting books in boxes and out of boxes, and a lot of money into kind of shipping.
That's so funny. That's so funny. Do you have a favorite bookstore? I mean, you've been all over the world, so you must find stopping in actual real bookstores still a thing.
I don't think that is as one specific. I think that nothing beats that obscure bookstore that is feels like a kind of almost kind of an abandoned shop with kind of dim lights. Maybe has someone inside that is super passionate about what they do. They're not doing it because of because it's a business, but they do it because it's because it's their life, it's their passion. Being guided right by the owner into kind of finding the odd book, the rarities and stuff. I think that nothing beat that type of experience, and you can find one of those anywhere in the world.
Yeah, that's so true. I think about that. My first answer for myself would be Foyles in London, just because I've never seen a place that was so enormous and filled with so many versions and types of books. Like there were things you wouldn't find in a regular bookstore. So I was there for a day, just moving through to discover, because I think the art of discovery in a bookstore is so much what makes the experience of owning books fun too, right? I found this after looking at everything. I do worry a little bit as we move to a digitized world, what that means for that sort of fulfillment of emotion and experience. How do you think about that? You're obviously still working in physical products, but in hardware obviously is a physical product, but I think it's servicing in many cases a digital experience. So how do you think about that part of like where the customer is going with their expectation around experience? Because people love Kindle, they love audiobooks, they love the non-physical format of books. So are we moving from physical to these digital experiences because they're convenient and easy and cheaper, or is it because people have found them to provide some other value proposition that then makes the physical less desirable?
Yeah. I think that when it comes to books, at least, what we have seen is not much a transition from digital to from physical to digital, but it's more a split in the market, right? Because when it comes to books, there is part of the market that be consider the book a commodity, and that's the part of the market that's transitioned to digital. And then there is part of it that consider the book more of an experience, right? And that is the part that will never fully transition to digital. And so I think that books as we know them will endure because of this. It's going to be a relatively smaller market because it's not going to be a mass market anymore, but it's going to be more kind of a niche enthusiast type of market. And in general, I think that overall in the industry, and this is valid also for our software technology world, there is a bit of a bouncing back phenomenon. We started, I would say, in the early 2000s, a massive transition from hardware defined to software defined experiences. Now we are seeing we are coming to the realization that not everything is actually made better when it's software defined. And there is a bit of a bounce back. You kind of see that in automotive, right? At some point everything was touch screen based. Now they're going back to physical buttons and stuff, right? And there is the same type of phenomenon that is happening across many different industries. And so I think that we are bringing back after a big hangover, right, about going software defined. I think that we are bringing back those experiences that really matter and where the physicality of it makes a meaningful difference to them.
I love that. And I totally agree. As someone who gets tense when my car technology, right, the screen isn't doing what I want it to do, it's very distracting when I'm driving. A button doesn't create that problem for me, right? Like a physical button or a physical lever is a lot easier for me to go on, off, or yes, no, or click around. But this idea that there's this touch screen and it's not doing what I want, now I feel like I do when I get the blue screen of death on my computer. Like, oh, now what? Right? And how dangerous is that?
Absolutely. And if you want, there is a lesson, right, there that I learned, the hard way, which is you can simplify only so much before you start adding more complexity to the system than the ones that you are taking away. This is, called simplexity, this phenomenon. And I kind of, I've made that. It's one of the mistakes, right? One of the failures that I've done in the past. And I'm now very aware of it. And I know that, you need to surrender or come to terms with the idea that there are some things that are worth simplifying and other things that you don't think about simplifying them. You need to streamline them to make them more efficient. It's like make easy things simple and complex things doable, right?
Love that. This has been so wonderful, Marcello. How can people learn more about you or Arduino and be in touch to get more insight from you?
Well, so Arduino is, pretty much everywhere, right? There is an Arduino community everywhere, but of course, Arduino is also a company and is a community that, it really revolves around, the different websites that are part of Arduino. So it's arduino.cc, both forums, Project Hub, and, the corporate website. And as far as I'm concerned, I fall victim of, being on LinkedIn too much. And so, just looking for me on LinkedIn is probably the best and easier way to find me.
This has just been such a delightful conversation, Marcello. Thank you so much for your time. I really enjoyed this. I'm so happy that you made it work for your time zone and that we covered the ground that we did. Thanks for joining me today.
It was a ton of fun. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to What If with Leslie Grandy. If you want to learn more about creative leadership in the age of generative AI, subscribe to my Substack at lesliegrandy.substack.com.